Here, we're going to be graphing trig functions, and we're going to identify all these different things, and then we're going to graph it. But there isn't necessarily a right way to do it, but there's an easier way to do it. So that's kind of what I'm going to outline for you, is the easiest way to graph these. So in sketching them, there's kind of an order that you're going to want to do this that'll make things easier for you. The first thing that we're going to do on all of these is to just go through and identify all the different transformations. So like we're going to write out what is the period, what is the amplitude, what is there a reflection, is there a phase shift, is there a vertical shift. We're going to go through and identify all of that stuff first. It's a good place to start. Don't necessarily follow the directions it has on the top there. They're not my directions. There's, I would follow these steps. So identify all those. So with that, let's go ahead and look at the first one and kind of do this as we go along. So with our first question there, what is the period of this function? What's the period of 2/3 sine x? Is that one? Nope. What did you say? It's 2 pi, yeah, 2 pi. So there is a 1 here, but that's not necessarily the period. The period is always 2 pi over the b, okay? Period is 2 pi over b, and the b is 1, okay, in this case. So there's an invisible 1 there, so 2 pi over 1. The other thing that we know, if there's no number there, then we just assume it's 2 pi because, well, it's just the sine or cosine term function here is 2 pi. All right. So no period's 2 pi. Right? What is the amplitude of this function? Right, 2/3, because it's the number in front. Okay. Is there a reflection? No. So say none, or you could say NA or none, or whatever you want to say. Or just put a line through it if you want to. You can just go like that. All right, phase shift. Is there a phase shift? No. Nope, not on here. Let's just put a line through it. All right, and vertical shift. None. So there you go. All right. Okay, so got all of our transformations. We only have really two things. We got the period and the amplitude. All right, let's flip back to our notes here. Next one, we're going to label the x-axis using our period. Label the x-axis using the period. So depending on what the period length is, if its period is like 4 pi, then we're going to want to label the x-axis a little bit differently. Or if it's pi over 2, we're going to label the x-axis. All right, so let's try that using this. All right, so we're gonna go out to 2 pi is the furthest we need to go for right now. How many spaces over do you think we should go?
Probably 4.
Yeah, 4 would be perfect. Yep. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're gonna put 2 pi out here. And that's what we're always gonna want to do. We're always gonna go 4 spots. 4 spots. Yeah. So we're always gonna go 4 spaces over. And you could even make note of that one. You could say 4 units over. 4 units over. And there's a reason we're doing 4. It's just going to make the graph easier. You remember when we learned the sine cosine stuff? Think of it as like in 4 sort of parts, like up and then the down and then the up and then the down. So thinking of it in 4 parts is the easiest way to do it. All right, so we got our period, and then let's go ahead and label these 3 in between there. The easiest thing to do would be to do half of that. Well, half of 2 pi is pi. Okay, and then do half of this one. Halfway between 0 and pi would be pi over 2. And then halfway between 1 pi and 2 pi is 3 pi over 2. So we're going to label our axes there. Axis. Does that make sense so far? Mm-hmm. All right, got that done. Next, we're going to graph the midline. Okay? And we're going to do so using the vertical shift. So if it's going to shift up, then the midline, it's just going to be a dotted line, but it's going to help guide us as we do this. We're going to put the midline there using the vertical shift. Because if you remember, the vertical shift is basically the midline. Right? Add that. Graph the midline using the vertical shift. Now this one does not have a vertical shift, right? So where's the midline? 0. All right, 0. So I'm going to just put a little dotted line. And you don't really even have to be able to see for this one. There we go. So we know the center. And then the last thing we're going to do is it's kind of combining several steps, but you're going to think of all these together. We're always going to plot 5 points, and we're going to take into consideration what the amplitude is, if there's a reflection, and if there's a phase shift. So we're kind of just going to take all of those into consideration to plot our 5 points. Generally, there won't be all 3 of those. Sometimes there could be, but we'll work our way up to that. So I'm going to consider these 3 things and plot 5 points. I do want you to make sure you always do that for 5 points. So you might wonder then, well, what are the 5 points? Well, for just the general sine function, hopefully you could identify what they were. Let's see if you guys can identify them. All right. So we'll just call these the 5 points of sine. And we're just going to do one period. Okay. Obviously, sine goes on forever, but I'm not going to draw a graph for the rest of your life. Draw the same graph. So. All right. So for sine, I'm just going to do a little sketch here. Here's your 5 points of like your parent function. You got our 2 pi, pi, pi over 2, and our 3 pi over 2. And then on my y-axis, I've got 1 and -1.
Is this important?
It might be helpful if you don't know it. Some people will already know this. And there's sort of 5 points we're going to graph. And now these will change depending on what the amplitude is and there's a phase shift. What would be the first point we should put?
0.
Yep, 0. And what I like to do is just do all the ones along the midline or the middle first. So 0, 0, and then where would be the next one along here?
Pi.
Okay, pi, and 2 pi, yep. So just sort of put all, those 3 are always going to be in line for sine. Yeah, just as a general in your notes, yeah. It's helpful. You don't have to write down, it's up to you. So this is for sine, okay, because it starts at 0, it crosses 0 in the middle, and then it ends back at 0. And then halfway between here, it's going to go up to 1, and then halfway between here, it goes down to -1. So those are our 5 points. So we got the 3 in the middle. We know the sine goes up, back to the middle, goes down, and then back to 0. That's what sine looks like. So whenever we draw a sine function, we're going to have 5 points, look something like this. We're going to have our sort of a 3 in the middle. We're going to have one where it goes up, and then one where it goes down, and then we can just draw it. Okay. So we kind of have this symmetry we have. Again, think of it in 4 sections. We go up, we go back down to 0, we go down, and we go back up. This 5 points then divided into 4 sections. Okay, now let's go ahead and go back to this graph. So keeping in mind those 5 points, let's go ahead and put the 3 sort of that are along the axis, along the midline. So we're not moving this thing up or down. We've already established that we put the midline. So I'm just going to put these 3 points here at pi and 2 pi. It's going to be the same. All right, and then we need to think about the amplitude and the reflection and the phase shift. Okay. So the amplitude is 2/3. So instead of going up to 1, right, if this is 1, I don't want to go up to 1, I want to go up to 2/3. Right? So right here, it's going to be 2/3 instead of up to 1. Right? And then down here, it's not going to go down to 1, it's going to go down to 2/3. And we didn't have a reflection, so we don't need to worry about switching them. We also didn't have a phase shift, so we don't have to shift them left to right. This is all we've got going on. So then we'll just go ahead and points. There we go. Make sure it's nice, smooth. What's it? Yeah. Yeah, you could. So if you want to make this like 1/3, and you want to make that 2/3, and you want to make that 1, you can do that too. Okay. Are you good with that start? All right. Let's try another one. We're gonna let's do. Let's try this one here. So let's go ahead and label these first. The period. We know the period on this one. 4 pi. Yeah, 4 pi. So how you're going to find it, it's always 2 pi over b. So in this case, it's going to be 2 pi over, this is b right here. So 2 pi over a half. And then, so when you were doing the delta math yesterday, and Eric said you could just type this in as the whatever. Well, the reason why I said don't do that is because you can't type that for a period. It's not going to help, right? Doesn't mean a lot. 2 pi divided by half. So you do have to keep change flip. So keep the top, change it to multiplication, flip it. 2 pi times 2 is 4 pi. So that's what we want to write. 4 pi. Okay, what's the amplitude? Yep. Reflection? Nope. Phase shift? Nope. No vertical shift either. Okay, so this one, we're going to go ahead and label here using our period first. So we're still going to go 4 spaces, but what's going to be our 4th space? What are we going to label it? All right, we're going to call it 4 pi instead of 2 pi this time. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then go half of that. So half of 4 pi is 2 pi. Yep. Okay, and then half of that, 1 pi, makes this 3 pi. So we're basically just going to change how we label the axes on all these. The y should be fine, keeping it as 1. If you want to change the y, you can. You don't have to change the y. So 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. Okay? The midline didn't change on this one again. There's no vertical shift, so we can just still keep our midline in the same spot. And now we can go ahead and plot our 5 points. So we're going to put 3 of them on the midline. There's no phase shift, so again, we don't have to move them left to right. So 0, 2 pi, and 4 pi this time. And our amplitude is 2, so now we need to go up to 2, down to -2. So we go at pi comma 2, 3 pi, -2. And the graph. All right, let's flip to the next page. We'll throw in a vertical shift on the next page. All right, let's do number 5. So number 5, take a second and go ahead and try to fill in these. Fill in the all the. Period ends up being the same. It's 4 pi again because it's 2 pi over half. The amplitude is 1, right? Because there's nothing there. So you do want to write 1. Don't like mark that one out because the amplitude is 1. There's no reflection. Is there a phase shift on this one?
No.
It's not in parentheses, so it's not a phase shift. This one you'll see does have a phase shift because it's in parentheses. This one does not. It does have a vertical shift though, right? Yeah, -4. Okay, so when we label this one, we still want to start by labeling our period first. Our axes, so there's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The same labels as the last one. So we got pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. Now for this one though, our second step that we said was to label the midline. And we haven't had one like this yet. But we're going to go ahead and label the midline using the vertical shift. So with this midline being -4, I want to actually go down to -4 and put my midline there. Now I might need to just expand this graph just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and just draw another slash for my y-axis. Okay, so with this one, now we can go ahead and put our dots. And we're going to be starting on the midline with this, since our midline shifted. We still don't have a reflection. We don't have a phase shift. And the amplitude is 1, so we're only going to go for 1. So we'll put our 3 in the middle here first. So 0, 2 pi, and 4 pi. The amplitude is 1, so we'll just go up 1 here. And go down, -1 here. And all right, let's try one with a phase shift here. Let's do number 9. This one's got a lot going on. It's getting a little harder here. Take a second and go ahead and fill in these on number 9. Fill in those transformations. So there's no number in front of the parentheses, which means the period is just going to be 2 pi. If the period was going to change, there would have to be a number in front there. There's not. So the period is 2 pi. The amplitude is going to be 4. No reflection yet. This one does have a phase shift. But for my phase shift, I'm not going to write -3 pi over 2. I'm going to write +3 pi over 2. Because remember, when we write out the formula for this, it was like our A sine B times X minus C. plus b? Doesn't remember. Because this one's always the opposite when it's inside, right? So I'm going to write positive 3 pi over 2, because that will also remind me that I'm going to move it to the right 3 pi over 2, not to the left, even though it's minus. And then there's no vertical shift, because there's no plus or minus opposite. Okay, so we'll still start with our period. We'll go ahead and label the x-axis. So 4 start. 2 pi. Divide that in half. Divide that one in half. That one in half. Right, and our midline, there's no vertical shift, so our midline is going to be on the axis. Now, when we plot our points, though, we have this phase shift here. We also have to consider the amplitude. So we know we're going to go up to 4, right, for the amplitude. So I should just go ahead and label 1, 2, 3, 4. So we know we're going to go up to 4 eventually. But this phase shift is going to move it left or right. So instead of putting my first dot here at 0, I need to move it over by 3 pi over 2. So I'm going to put my first dot, not at 0, but I'm going to move it to the right over to 3 pi over 2. Tracking that? So I'm moving my first dot from 0 over to 3 pi over 2 because I'm shifting it to the right 3 pi over 2. Which means I am going to need to actually extend this a little bit out here. We know my next one's going to go here because we skipped one, and then we end there as well. Let's expand this just a little bit. One more to do it. So I'm still going to have the same idea, it's just I'm shifting all 3 of those points over. And I do need to extend these labels, so let's see if we can figure those out. This can be kind of the hardest thing, is extending these labels. So what comes after 2 pi if I'm going by pi over 2s?
5
5 pi over 2, yeah. 5 pi over 2, yeah. And then what? 1 before that. 3 pi. 3 pi. Okay. And then what about after that? 7 pi. Okay. So 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, 5 pi over 2, 6 pi over 2, 7 pi over 2. Okay. So they're shifted over to the phase shift. Check that one out real good. The last thing we haven't done is the amplitude. So with the amplitude, I know the one in the middle of these is going to go up, so it's going to go up to 4. It's going to go up to 4, and then in between these two, it's going to go down to -4. And then I can go ahead and connect them. It's a little more intense on that one. We're going to do one more together. Do you guys want to do probably 9 or 10, right? I'm going to do a reflection. Or sorry, 8 or 10. I want to do one with a reflection. You want to do number 8 or number 10?
Number 10.
Okay.
Usually the last question's the hardest. Yeah, we
We won't tackle the next page today. We're just going to do signs today. We'll do signs. All right. So first one, go ahead and label those real quick. Put your information in there. So the amplitude is 1. You could write -1 if you want to, but technically amplitude is always a positive number. So there is a reflection, and I'll write over the x-axis. They're all going to be over the x-axis. If you just write yes or something, that's fine. But they're all going to be over the x-axis. Phase shift, there is a phase shift, right? This here. And since it's a plus pi over 2, I'm actually going to write minus pi over 2. And write the opposite. And there is a vertical shift as well. Alright, so still follow the same steps. We're going to start by labeling our axes. Since it's 2 pi, we'll start just the same. Go over 4 spots. 2 pi. 2. Might have to expand it, but start there. Alright, next thing we should do is the midline. The midline, we look at the vertical shift. It's up 1, so our midline is going to go up 1. So that's going to remind us that we're going to want to start here for sine. We're going to start on the midline. Okay, now this one reflects and has a phase shift. So let's think about what that means. The amplitude is 1, so here. We always start here. We're going to reflect it. Is that going to change at this point at all when we're reflecting? This one will not change because it's just going to be, well, it's still on the middle, reflecting from the middle. It doesn't change. All right. Now, the next one, though, right, is going to be the phase shift. So this tells a left pi over 2. So each of these is a pi over 2. I'm going to go ahead and just label this one negative pi over 2. That's all of where we'll actually need to go. So we're going to move it to the left. I'm just going to put the dot here. And the ones on the axis will just stay the same. So then I'll skip one, skip another one. The only thing that's going to change when we reflect, and if you want to write this in your notes, you can, is if this one is y equals sine of x, then y equals negative sine of x is going to be the same thing. This, except it's going to go down and then up. So that blue would be white, negative sine of x. So really all that's going to do is just change the order. Instead of going up first, we're going to go down first, and then we're going to go up. Okay, that's all that's going to happen. So now instead of going up with an amplitude of 1 right here, we're going to go down with an amplitude of 1. Just changing the order again. Right. So we're going to go down here, and then this one's going to go up. So then we're going to go. So it just switches the order. The reflection I know is a little bit confusing, but all it's going to have you do is basically just switch the order. Instead of going up first, you're going to go down first. Okay, I want you guys to try the other ones on your own. Some of them are pretty easy. Number 8 is a little more challenging, and number 6 and 7 shouldn't be too bad. But so for tonight, I want you to finish the other ones that we did do. So 5 up to number 10. So you've got 8, 6, 7, 8, and then 2 and 4. Okay. So that's you have the rest of the period to work on that. Just 15 minutes.